Hi, Katie. Well, I decided to do this apart from my keyboard after all. Number one, when did you start teaching the world religions course? Well, I started teaching it when I came to Point Loma in '99, but they certainly had a course before then. In fact, at the time and when I first came here, we actually had two courses, a situation which I'd love to get back. Man, I might have to work on that. We had a course on what we sort of typically call the Western traditions of Islam and Judaism. Maybe Christianity was included in there somewhat. Sometimes Zoroastrianism is included as a Western tradition. And then we also had an Asian religions course. That would be your various forms of Hinduism and Buddhism, Taoism, Japanese Shinto, and Confucianism. So Point Loma actually has had a long history, as many schools certainly do, including most, if not all, Nazarene schools for that matter, had world religions courses. Again, I've been teaching either of those two, or in the last 5 or 6 years, it got combined into one course, the world's faith traditions, and I've been teaching it ever since I came to Point Loma, so over 20 years. So it wasn't me that I wasn't prompted to offer the course. It was already on the books. I'm happy to say. As far as what prompted the school, I mean, the simplest answer is it's part of really a liberal arts education, especially I think in a Christian setting, to have at least some knowledge and awareness of other people's cultures, including their religious convictions and practices. Of course, we have other courses that address some of that. I'm sure that in World Civ, students learn some stuff about Buddhism and Confucianism, and I know that Bill Wood does quite a bit in Islam in the history department. So yeah, I think what prompts any school to have a course like this is simply the recognition that to love your neighbor as yourself, you need to be able to love your neighbor intelligently, which certainly can and should include knowing and understanding your neighbor's religious tradition, convictions, and practices, particularly if they're quite different from yours. Number three, have you had students who were not of the Christian faith who took that particular course? Well, I'm sure I have. Probably most of them have at least been raised within the Christian faith. Although I do, strangely enough, I actually had more students who were specifically not of Christian faith who took this course when I taught in Nampa, Idaho. I would have expected much more in San Diego, California, but I taught in Nampa, Idaho, Northwest Nazarene College, for my first 11 years, and taught world religions there. And I know that in the very first time I taught it, so yeah, I think either my first or second year as a professor, I actually had a young man who was from a high caste Hindu family in India, who was going to college at Northwest Nazarene, and he took this class. And I remember being a bit intimidated, given that we started with Hinduism in this course. And I would check in with him several times a class session and say, am I doing it okay? I don't want to misrepresent anything or, caricaturize any of your beliefs and so on. And he was always very encouraging and told me I was doing great, so I felt good about that. But there's a PS to this guy. I can't remember his name now. My goodness, this has been so long ago. But we took a course visit to the one synagogue in the whole state of Idaho, in nearby Boise, Idaho. So it's a half-hour drive. And we visited there for a Friday night Shabbat or Sabbath service. And the synagogue congregation in Boise was small enough then. They later changed the situation, but at that point, they were flying in a rabbinic student, like a seminary student, I think every other weekend. They didn't have, in other words, they did not have their own rabbi. They did not have a full-time rabbi. Well, this year that I'm remembering I took this class over, they had a young woman. They were flying up from Hebrew Union College down here in L.A. And it just so happens that she was beautiful. She had long, dark, silky hair, and she sang beautifully. And of course, and she kind of doubled as what's called the cantor, or the leader of the sort of the singing portion of the worship. I tell you all this to say that my young Hindu student fell head over heels in infatuation, at least, with this rabbinic student who was probably, not much more than 6-7 years older than he was. I mean, so it was, within range, more or less. But I just got such a kick out of the fact that I had this Hindu student who was gaga over the rabbi, the rabbinic student at the synagogue in Boise. But I have had some Muslim students, again, not here at Point Loma, but strangely enough, in Nampa, Idaho. I had Muslim students in world religions. I think that's probably been about the extent of students of other religious traditions. My screen went dead on me here because I talked so long. Hopefully you can find something in there that you want to write. Let's see. Any memorable feedback from them? Yeah, what I've told you is about the best. I do know that the Hindu student really liked the class. Why are courses focused solely on different religions? Why are courses focused solely on different religions not offered? I guess what you mean is, why don't we have classes that are simply on this religion or that? Probably just a matter of course load and the way that as professors, so much of our load is accounted for by general education courses, like Christian tradition, which I teach a lot of. Again, Point Loma used to come a little closer to that by having a Western traditions course and an Asian traditions course. And to be honest, that was actually one of the attractive elements of what I knew my teaching slate would be when I came to Point Loma. I really looked forward to the situation of having more time to work on some of these traditions with students. But it is difficult given the realities of course load and so on. Your questions make me want to go back and lobby hard for having a world religions course offered each year. Right now we're on the every other year basis, but if we did it every year, I could go back maybe to dividing that into two. I might have to talk to my dean about that. My favorite part of teaching the world religions courses, well, I'd say because I'm just sort of a lifelong learner and deeply interested in how human beings have tried to make ultimate sense of their lives and have asked, huge philosophical and spiritual questions, and that the answers have been both the diagnosis of the problem and the solution to the problem have been so different among religions, even while there are these interesting parallels and comparisons that can be made. So that I think especially, of course, with Judaism and Islam, Christian theologians have often grappled with very similar questions. And a lot of times, of course, even with similar vocabulary. Nonetheless, the differences among the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim traditions are quite significant, even for all their shared concerns and even shared scriptures in many ways. But I love teaching and learning about the Asian traditions, partly because they're just so very different, and thus I think often speak to very different aspects of human experience than we typically try to address in Christianity. And so I'd say all of these traditions keep me on my toes. They're challenging. I'm always learning new things, and I love learning new things, and I love sharing that with students. And as a Christian theologian, it's always been one of the enduring, I would say, concerns and commitments of my life and my vocation to try to, I'll go back to where I started, to try to understand my religious neighbor well, because I cannot love that person meaningfully and intelligently if I'm an utter ignoramus about that person's own religious upbringing and convictions and practices, even if the person is no longer following them. Obviously, our religious traditions tend to shape us and mold our lives very deeply. And I'm very interested in how the various religious traditions cultivate, which is a good word to end, cultivate human life and human character. Well, I hope this will be helpful. Thanks a lot for the opportunity to address these questions.